Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
On the show with us today, all the way from Edinburgh, Scotland, David Law is joining us. Launched from the Product Design Engineering Interdisciplinary course. That's a big word in itself.
It is. There's a mouthful.
From Glasgow University and Glasgow School of Art with first-class honors, David has played an active role in designing the future. He started designing injection tools for a Japanese company and generated multiple patents while at IDEO, which is a Palo Alto-based design consultancy, in the early 90s. And founded Spec Design, a product design consultancy that partners with clients to create innovative designs, integrating complex engineering with timeless design. His last 25 years in the Silicon Valley and internationally has added entrepreneurial depth to that design background. David, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you.
So we came across your people, your team, at the Summer NAMM show in Nashville, Tennessee this past summer. And you have a very interesting piece of product that you guys have created. I actually have it sitting on my desk. And the last few podcast episodes that we have filmed, we've been showing it. Those episodes will be released at a later date, so everybody get a really good look what this is. But you guys have created something that I guess really nobody else has really thought about doing, and that's a truly portable, transportable music instrument stand. I read a little bit about the history. It was your kids that kind of motivated you to design this, right?
It is. So I have now 14 going on 20 and an 11-year-old. And so my 14-year-old was just going into fifth grade. So I was living in actually in California, I think, or is it fourth grade? She was going into fourth or fifth grade, and every single student in that school district gets to, play a musical instrument. And you just see them carrying all this stuff on their bikes and walking to school. They've got their backpack, they've got lunch, they've got their books, then they have their music stuff, and then they have a music, and then they have an instrument, and they're just overloaded. So I'm like, oh my God. And what was interesting, like in their first week or two, their music instructor actually had them constructing, the metal stands that are everywhere, the kind of your typical and a cheap stand. And so the music instructor actually had them, they timed them like how fast they could put these together. It was like, I think she'd had so many bad experiences during her, numerous years that was one of the first things she did. Like, okay, I'm going to get them so they can actually open the damn thing and get it up. So yeah, that was the inspiration. Just how do you get a smaller music stand? And it's actually a pretty tricky problem.
Looking back to my school days, elementary and junior high school, and it actually wasn't until high school that we got into the really nice Manhasset, the black stands that were kind of pneumatic and would go up and down. In elementary and junior high school, middle school that we call it here, it was these little, what you're talking about, these little spindly, portable, real flexible, fall apart at a moment's notice and a really light breeze stands. And that's what we lived with because nobody knew any better. And then, like I said, you graduate into high school and then you go into college and you have the really big, bulky Manhasset stands, which literally do not collapse into themselves or fold up neatly.
They're a great stand.
Yeah, great stand, but you can't do much with them other than put your materials on it and hope for the best. So when you started designing this this stand. And let me get the right name. Is it the Noisy Clan Wii Stand?
Yes. So company name is Noisy Clan, and our first product, which is this portable music stand, is called the Wii Stand or Wii Stand, because obviously Wii is a Scottish word that everyone uses around here. So we just thought it'd be an interesting way to just take a little play on words.
How did you come about designing this? Obviously, your background in what you've accomplished with other things. Did you have a vision of how this was going to look when you first started conceiving it? Or was it just something you took pen to paper and worked from scratch?
I'm very much product design professional. I don't know quite what I mean by that, but I'm very used to kind of the blank paper, starting with a problem and then trying to solve it. And typically the end product is very different than the original product that you think about.
Right.
So when we first started, the first product was, okay, well, they always have folders and they always have a music stand. Let's combine those two. And so kind of pursued that for quite a bit. We created prototypes, plastic with a folder, and it had combined legs and everything like that. And it was interesting, but it felt very, it just wasn't right. And I kind of took the prototype and showed it to a bunch of people, and everyone's reaction was, okay. And so, yes, the end product is quite different from where we started. So the end product essentially became a very much standalone kind of ultra-portable music stand, whereas kind of where I started was trying to combine what I saw as these two bulky items, which they always carried. And so it was like, okay, well, if you could just combine the stand with, the sheath of music, which they always had these folders. It seemed like that was a way to save a bunch of space and weight, but couldn't make it work.
I use it here in the studio, the sample that you sent us. I put my tablet on it. So it's not just for music. I mean, it's a great, literally, quote unquote, platform to put whatever device you want on there. But it's also designed in a way that, and I found this so intriguing, because first of all, when it showed up in the box, I went, there's no flipping way this is a music stand. And it took me a minute to get it open, get the legs extended, because this can either, like I have it, sitting on a desktop, or you can actually extend the legs to floor. And it gets how tall when you do that?
Well, it gets to standard, pretty much maximum height of the majority of stands out there. So the kind of floor to the bottom lip of the thing is around 1.15 meters,
right?
Which is pretty much standard, except if you get some of the extended music stands. So yeah, it gets reasonable height. I mean, we definitely have people saying, well, I'm 6'5". Do you have anything that, a singer can use? And we're like, not yet.
Yeah, gotcha.
But yeah, I'm glad you had that reaction, because we definitely, it's tiny when you compare it volumetrically to other stands. Like it's probably a quarter of the size of your typical just metal stand. And we package it differently. So, it comes in a beautiful little, we call it a keepsake box, because we kind of have to put it in a box. Ultimately that seems like it was all just going to get thrown away. So we're like, well, can we make it more interesting and so people keep it around?
Right.
So like we subtly on the outside, we obviously put the Noisy so that people, a little bit of marketing, people are reminded of us, but it's not so much that you wouldn't keep it. And so you could put your little musical knickknacks and things like that. Like I don't expect people to put their stand back in it, but because you can, it's robust enough, you can just shove it in your bag or gig bag and stuff like that. But throw your picks or violin wax or whatever you kind of have lying, because you always have stuff lying around which is musical in nature.
Well, in fact, what I found very interestingly is that it folds up to where I could actually stick it in my jacket pocket, on the inside of my jacket pocket.
You can. It's a little bit of people ask you, why, what's in your pocket there? So
yeah. Well, none of their business, but let me show
Yes.
you. Let me whip it out and show it to you. In the studio with us today is David Law, who is the CEO of Noisy Clan. And we're talking about this really innovative, I think that's the word I want to use, this very innovative piece of musical equipment that I think has been overlooked for 50, 60 plus years.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena, and believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics, all written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message.
When you have a Korg synth at your fingertips, the possibilities are endless. Be it digital, analog modeling, altered FM, wave sequencing, or the multi-engine synth, Korg gives you easy access to a variety of features to help you get the perfect sounds quickly. Whether you're a professional musician or just starting out, Korg truly has a synthesizer to help you express yourself. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products to create new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the Business Side of Music.
You're listening to the Business Side of Music.
Let's back up a little bit, because as a kid, you had an interesting life in the aspect that your mom was a teacher and your dad was an air traffic controller, and you learned how to sail. I guess that's a lot of what you did as a youth in your spare time.
Wow, you've done some research.
How did you transition from that into this really tech-savvy entrepreneurial spirit that you have now?
That's a long and some bumpy road that my parents experienced. I mean, the sailing thing was my dad's passion. So my dad went into the merchant marine when he was a young man, sailed all around the world back in the 50s, and essentially grounded himself when my sister came along. And so his survival technique was to buy a very small boat that he could work on and essentially sail every moment that he could. So that's how I grew up sailing. In response to your, probably more specific to your question, sailing is one of those, there's a lot of tech in, like I call mechanical tech. There's lots of bits and little mechanics and ropes and pulleys and screws, and you've got to think about the forces in the sails. So it's kind of a very mechanical thing. And so when I first went to college, I went to ocean engineering and naval architecture. So I was very influenced by my sailing background. And I crashed and burned my first university experience. I think after 3 years, and it was supposed to be a 3-year course, I got like 8.5 credits where you need 9 to graduate. And so took off for a year, taught sailing in the Caribbean, traveled around the States, hitchhiked around the States, went back to Scotland, and what am I going to do? I don't want to stand on the beach for the rest of my life. And so went back trying to figure out, okay, what course do I want to do? And I stumbled on this design engineering, and it was kind of the extreme opposite of what I would call a traditional engineering course. So a traditional engineering course, they kind of give you a bunch of information and then they expect you to regurgitate it. And so a design, this is very much a kind of first of its kind in Scotland, this design engineering course. So it was taught between the art school and the engineering school. So there's a lot of tension between those two kind of entities. And so it was very much a case of, here's a blank page. How do you solve, this problem? And so it was kind of like lit a fire or a passion in me around, this is just much more interesting than regurgitating kind of equations and, safety factors.
When you first started developing this, once again, I'm going to call it a piece of equipment, but in some aspects, it's also a piece of artwork when you look at it from a certain angle, a certain perspective. How many years of development did it take you to get through all the prototypes to get to this model?
A lot. I mean, I want to say it's quick and easy, but it always takes you longer than you think it's going to take. So it wasn't full time. So probably started in 2017 with, in anger, starting to build prototypes. I hired a couple of people I'd worked with to kind of help me do some ideation, you're sending off to get things built, talking to manufacturing places to get samples of legs and stuff like that. So that was 2017. And it probably took a hiatus. I moved back to Scotland in 2018, started something else, and then picked it up in anger probably in 2019 again. So then it took probably a year and a half. I hired a full-time design engineer to work on it. So we went numerous prototypes. I mean, we use Google Docs quite a lot to communicate because different kind of locations, and the Google Docs, like 400, 500 pages long, like presentation.
Oh,
so they'd have a picture and we'd kind of go back and forth and do design reviews and stuff like that. So yes, it just took a while. I mean, part of that was to your first question, like, did I have a vision when I started? Yes, but that's not where we ended up. And so we went down a number of paths. I mean, we took a while to get away from the folder kind of paradigm, which was combined folder and legs. And then we're going still for this tripod-y thing at the top, which was triangular. And then kind of got out of that, we got this kind of concept of the two back legs folding that's out together. And that was kind of the paradigm shift, which said, okay, well, how could we have these three legs that are live in plane, so they're as small as possible, and then these two outer legs kind of fold out and form the tripod. And so it's kind of from that, we still had a whole bunch of experimentation. So long answer to your question, but it just took a long time.
Plus, you had to figure out how to create these collapsible legs, how you had to create this folding platform. There's a lot of moving parts on this.
There is. I mean, the folding legs. So from the get-go, back to your question, what was the original vision? The original vision was luggage. So the classic example in modern times, I would say, of a ubiquitous folding mechanism, telescoping mechanism, is luggage handles. And so that was the inspiration. One of our first prototypes in California, we had this luggage thing, and you just did that, and the legs went like a piece of luggage, right, and kind of away you went. And so luggage legs very much don't have the typical tripod stuff that's on the outside to clamp it with. So they're kind of fixed. They have fixed locations, so it's not like a completely, you can stop it anywhere. And so looking at those, we essentially, part of the design process when you're a small company is trying to figure out, well, where is the innovation that we can really bring to the table? And how can we drive that innovation when, we can't build things really from the ground up? Like, we can't really build a technology from the ground up. So we kind of have to borrow technology. Mm-hmm. So the goal was originally, we think we can borrow kind of luggage technology. That's not used. It's probably pretty interesting. We get that whole collapsing and being able to do something quickly. And then so part of our process would be, okay, let's look at everything that's collapsible. So luggage, any pole you can imagine in your household, window washers, things like that, we'd purchase off of Amazon or Alibaba or something like that and get samples and say, okay, well, do we think this would work? It's got this locking mechanism. Well, how big is it? Like, what's the force it could take? And one of the most interesting ones was, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a whole subgenre of fly fishing that use carbon fiber rods that collapse down to a very, very tiny length. And so these carbon fiber logs then extend out to like, I want to say 10 feet to give you a fly fishing rod. I can't remember the name. It's like Tenco or Tensu. I'm terrible at names, but there's a particular name for that kind of fly fishing genre. And so we got a sample of that. And we're like, oh, bingo. Super light, has no mechanism, kind of relies on that friction lock to set it all up, and can extend to 10 feet from something like a foot and a half. And so that was the aha moment of, okay, here's the technology. It's not being used in tripods. It's not being used in music stands. let's see what we can do to bring it over into this genre.
When you designed not the legs, but when you designed the stand part of it, the piece where you set the music on, did you have to go through several different iterations to figure out what would work? You'd still be able to hold either a folder up there or a music. What was the mindset? Why did you wind up choosing the size that it is now?
We did. I mean, I'm sure you're very familiar with the design process, but the design process is pretty much kind of understand, create, and then test. And so those three things, like you try and understand, like, what are the real issues here? So what are people holding on the platform? Paper, double sheets of paper, books. Obviously, there's some that have 5 sheets wide. They have folders. More and more people are using tablets, iPads, and the Androids. And so kind of understanding that thing. And then we very much create, and there's a whole serendipity around building stuff. And so, it's true whether you're writing or designing. Like when you have an idea, you sketch it, you move the stuff forward. But if you build something, you're like, oh, I never thought of that. You actually put something on a piece of plastic that you've had printed, and you're like, oh, well, it doesn't quite work as I thought it would be, but it does this and this and this. So to your question, yeah, we tried lots of different iterations, and we just kind of loop in that iteration loop of, how do we get it to be small when it's closed, if you like, and how do we get it out? What's the size of the lip that we should do? Is it okay? Because we actually stagger the lips when you think about it. Like the outer lip goes over the inner lip, so when they fold out, they're actually slightly different heights. So if you're OCD, this stand may just drive you crazy, but it's not really enough to matter. And then, you've got the letter size, and you've got A4 size, and we want to be able to do 2 together. And so how do you hold 2 together if they're just loose leaves? So, any design project requires a lot of that iteration and thinking about all of the issues and talking to as many people as possible. Like, here, musician, what do you think of this? What do you think? What do you use normally? Try and observe them when they're, what do they carry with them? Like, what are they actually putting on their stand? Anyway, so it is a pretty involved process, not rocket science, but just a lot of iterations would be the short version.
On the show with us today, David Law, who is the CEO of Noisy Clan.
Hi, this is John M., singer-songwriter and author of Performance Matters, a guide to live music performance. And you are listening to The Business Side of Music with Bob Bender.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Are you curious about Gordon Lightfoot's songwriting process, or what it was like working with Prince in the 80s? Have you ever given any thought to what goes into a golf course design or writing a book? I'm Steve Waxman, the host of The Creationist, a podcast about people who create. Each episode features a different creator sharing stories that I hope will inspire your own creativity. The Creationist is available now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives, whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Funding a project like this, was this something that you did privately, or did you do crowdfunding? How did that come about, putting it all together from a financial aspect?
So I'm in the fortunate position to be able to self-fund. So I've had a number of businesses in the past and have had exits. And so I was able to fund kind of a couple of years of development or engineering and stuff like that. And then, historically, if you took a product, you essentially had to go all in on it. So 10 years ago, if you had an idea for a product, you would have to, be bullish about the idea. You'd have to spend money on the design of it. You'd have to spend money on the prototyping of it. And then you'd ask a few people what they thought of it, and everyone says it's great because, they want to make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd have to go and spend even more money tooling it. And then you'd spend, even more money buying your first inventory batch. And then at that point, you can kind of try and get it into stores, and that's your test. Is this a good idea? And so when you think about it, it's like that's an incredibly risky thing. And so, God bless crowdfunding. Yes, I kind of self-funded the development, but at some point, prior to like fully committing on inventory and tooling and all of this stuff, we're able to say, okay, we've got the design, we think it's really good. We can take videos of and pictures and show it to a bunch of people. Let's put it up in crowdfunding and really kind of make sure that people would actually want to buy this. And so crowdfunding was an integral part of our success of being able to say, all of these people are validating that, yes, this is a good idea. Yes, we are interested in an ultra-portable music stand. And so it just helps small companies like us get off the ground, whereas it would be much more investment required. We'd probably had to go out and, find someone to fund us.
With the music stand in its current design and it's out there for the public use, is there another model in the works? Are you looking forward, or are you just getting this one out there at this point?
I am plagued by looking forward. So, I mean, we're just shipping now with WeStand. So it's been a slightly longer road than we wanted, just with COVID.
And COVID, yeah.
So we'd hoped to have been shipping probably like 2 or 3 months ago, but we're finally shipping the WeStand. I think it's got a great future ahead of it, and I'm sure that we will have in a couple of years probably a few iterations of it. So the nature of innovation is that it's hard to make it cost effectively. So if you think about, most innovation happens in a niche, and so kind of the niche that we're launching into is this ultra portability. And so it's not going to suit everybody. It's not going to be everyone's bag of tea. And unfortunately, a niche typically means that there's less people in it. And so, we don't have the scale that a large manufacturer would have. So we can't drive prices down. We're using carbon fiber legs. So long-winded way of saying, one of our goals would be we kind of have to launch at this price to be able to survive. But as we get more market acceptance, the goal would be able to kind of come down in price so we can get to be a more mass market product. So there's that. So yes, there's probably a couple of versions of it in the future. How do we cost engineer it? So get rid of the carbon fiber legs. Maybe people don't mind it weighing a couple of 100 grams more. Is it possible to make it slightly bigger? All of these kind of considerations about how do we reduce the cost? And obviously by that time, presumably we have a known volume, so we can bargain more heavily as a known entity rather than as a startup with our suppliers, because we obviously don't have a factory. So that's one of the things we struggle with. And then to your question of other products, absolutely. We have, I just think the entire industry is, I don't want to slag people off, but there isn't a lot of great design in the music accessories industry. Music is quite a traditional place, and there's been lots of players that have been in it for a long time, and they really haven't been doing innovation. They've had good business. Why would they? So I think there's just lots of opportunities for doing interesting products that solve real problems, that kind of have just a different way of looking at the industry.
How can people find this Noisy Clan WeStand? How can they order it?
So we are still fulfilling our crowdfunding orders, and that's going to take another month or so. And so we are live on Indigo, which is still pre-order. So we will get to being in stock, I hope, in about 6 weeks or so. And then they should be able to order it. We'll have stock in the US, we'll have stock in the UK, and then probably in a couple of months after that, we'll be in Amazon. So one of our, if you think about the business of selling music accessories, Amazon's becoming a very big player in that industry. for good or bad. I'm not sure what, but you just have to kind of work with the devil.
Yeah, it's absolutely the big beast that we all have to surround ourselves with.
So they should be able to get it online at our store. We're not in distribution yet. We're talking to a couple of people, but we haven't committed to anyone yet. I think they're just waiting to see. And so, but we'll be in Amazon for sure, in the US, UK, and kind of expanding into other Amazon markets as we grow up.
So by the time our listeners are listening to this show, should be in place, hopefully.
I hope so.
Yeah, very good. David, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.